It started out with an idea to make a documentary.
Now, with over 60 interviews completed and more to record, it's time to listen fully.
These are the stories from those who experienced the Young Religious Unitarian Universalist program.
Okay. All right. So before we start, would you mind saying your full name and where you grew up and where you are now? Yeah.
My name is Julia Pulver. I grew up in Michigan, and I'm still in Michigan. I grew up in Canton, Michigan, and my home church was the Farmington UU Church. And I'm now in West Bloomfield, and I attend the Birmingham Unitarian Church and doing more of the youth group stuff and the cons and all that stuff at my current church at Birmingham Unitarian Church, which was just, about half hour, 40 minutes at the most away from that church. And so when you're, young and in the 90s and you have a car and you're 16, you just drive wherever you need to go to meet up with your people, right? So I started going to that youth group, which is called GOOSH, which was an acronym for, I've heard either great or good or groovy, something with a G, UU Senior High. So they had a much larger group. And so that's how I first got introduced to going to conferences and things like, I'll back up a little bit. When I was in middle school, I went to Marwood, which is a UU youth camp for, usually it starts like the summer after your 6th grade year. And then you go until the summer after your 9th grade year. And that is been going on for decades, I think since like the 60s now. And that is sort of a love child of the Oak Park, Illinois church. They started that, and it has since branched out to other places in the Midwest where kids come, from. But that was my first sort of experience meeting UU kids from other places in the country. So I got a little taste of that when I was in middle school, in the very beginning of high school. But then once you age out of that, then I really got into going to because I loved that feeling. I loved like, oh my gosh, there's a whole camp full of kids who are also UUs. I don't have to explain what that means. I don't have to have weird, adolescent theological debates where some kid goes, well, of course there's God, there's a Bible. It says so in there. And I go, yeah, but that's just like a book. And that's kind of like your book club, and I don't have to be in your book club. And they're like, no, it's not that, so it's like, you finally, when you're around your people and you don't have to explain anything, you just feel really like calm and like you can finally kind of just breathe and exist and not have to kind of always be on guard. So I got like a first little taste of that in middle school with this camp. And then after, you age out of it, there really wasn't anything that I knew of until I found out through Goosh about all these conferences, and I'm like, Mom, I got to go to this con, and she's like, what? and it was like, it's short for conference or something. She's like, oh, okay. She's like, I thought you were getting involved in some sort of like organized crime or something. So that's where I got my first start. Went to my first conference ever at BUC, and it just kind of snowballed from there as far as like being involved in YRUU and things like that. So that's kind of how I got my start.
Well, first of all, I love the GOOSH acronym because my group was called the HIP group. So we don't know what it stood for. We like made it up. Like some people years ago made it. We don't know what it. Nobody passed that knowledge on to us. So I love that you had a different name for the youth group, because oftentimes that YRUU name got just planted on the local churches, and then there was this, it and to me it was a separate thing. YRUU was the the conferences for, and then my youth group was my youth group. So it's so fascinating, and that was happening to you too. So that was a side note. But can we go back to the good old high school, going to high school? We often hear that phrase from people who we interview, that you or they felt like an outcast, different from others. Can you say more about that, and how you felt while learning and being in that atmosphere? And then, like, was it a different Julia? And was it a Julia, like when you went to Goosh or to YRU, were you a different person? So just tell me about the difference between the two.
Um, I really didn't like Code Switch at all. So being, I think, one of those people who was raised UU, and going through, RE is the equivalent of like a comparative world religions class for like little people, like where you're not little people, but for young people. And like, so I was very well versed in what my other friends' actual beliefs were, whether they knew it or not. And like I said, where I grew up was predominantly Catholic. And, um, I remember, as a kid, just even in elementary school, when a lot of my friends in second grade were starting to go through their like first confirmation thing, and like the first time that they get sort of like, because most of them were baptized as babies, and so they don't really remember it, but sort of like the first time that kids my age were getting like real into their own religions, which also has this sort of, there's a process, like a proselytization sort of, or evangelistic kind of component to it, where you're supposed to go and tell everyone about how great this is. Well, when you're in second grade, it comes usually in the form of like bullying the kids who are not in your catechism class, and trying to convert the heathens. And so I remember even just in second grade kind of having these, debates with my classmates. And even though I knew more than they would tell me, something, and I would say, okay, well, do you know why you do that? It's because, this one person made, do you know why you don't eat meat on Fridays? Like, because, the Pope decided to do this like a while ago. Like, I remembered like telling them these things and them going, nuh-uh, nuh-uh, and then like going home and running home and talking to their parents. And then like, I never heard for, again, or be like, did you ask? Because yeah. So like, I already had this sort of like, this persona, and my personality is one that's just always kind of just defiant, so I never really felt the need to like go along to get along. So I didn't really have two different versions of myself. It was more just like I was either constantly on and like on guard kind of a thing, or I could just relax, right? So if I was, I don't want to say like mixed company, you know what I mean? Like if I was in somewhere that was not just UU people, I would kind of always be a little bit on like have my guard up a little bit, but never really back down. Like I wouldn't pick fights, but like, I mean, I'm a little feisty. So like if people are especially using their religion as a way, as an excuse to hurt people, or, discriminate against people, or, I was very early on could learn the lessons of what supposedly should have been, every world religion of like, be a good person, don't hurt people who are vulnerable, help people, just don't be a jerk, and don't use your powers for evil. Like maybe I got some like superhero stuff mixed up in there, but it's all kind of the same, right? So I was always ready to sort of throw it back in their face when they would try to use their religion as an excuse to hurt people, or to keep others down, or lift themselves up as some sort of superiority kind of a thing. And then it was like I almost just felt a little inkling of like, all right, take them down a peg. Like they got it coming. they're gonna try to, make the one Jewish girl in our school cry and tell her she, is going to hell. Okay, well, I'm gonna tell them, there's no hell. It's just a story that Dante made up to make you all scared. Like It's not real. Your parents are lying to you, your priests are lying to you, everyone's lying to you. Like, so I really didn't ever try to guard myself, and like as much as other people might have if they felt like persecuted. I was more just kind of like always felt the need to be prepared for, you know, theological battle or something. So that's second grade. Like, but it did, like, it's gone on, like the throughout all of um my time in UU exclusive and non-UU spaces. Like, I really am not a different kind of a person. It's just I don't have to try as hard, at least from a theological standpoint. Then when I'm around other UUs, then we all start to get into more philosophical debates about whether or not whatever current topic is right or not, or if we should, whatever change people are proposing, if that's good or not. Like, we start to have a little bit more interesting debates where I'm not always just like, nope, that's inaccurate, or, oh, nope, that's not fact, that's an opinion. So that was really the only kind of difference in the way that I sort of interacted with people, was more just one of whether or not I can go, okay, we're starting from the same understanding, right? Or we're not starting from the same understanding, and I'm not going to accept your debate on your terms, where we're going to debate whether or not something in the Bible is literal or not. Like, like, this is not that. I'm not going to get into that with you. So that's really kind of only the difference. And I think a lot of that's just my personality. I'm just kind of spiky. I don't know. I've just always been kind of like, nope, I'm strong enough to like take on a lot of the blowback, but I can't be quiet. I'm not gonna zip it. I can't do it. Like I said, I didn't go looking for it, and I never like went out of my way. I mean, I'm a UU, right? We're UUs. We don't like pick on people for their beliefs. But if you try to weaponize your beliefs to hurt someone else, then I'm going to dismantle your argument, kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, I was growing up, I was always afraid to say I was going to church, right? Because I thought that people would just put a blanket statement or feeling or idea around that. Did you find that as well? Like, if you were ever say you were going to a church thing, did you have to explain yourself? Did you feel you had to explain yourself? Like, can you say about?
We still do. I mean, that's the thing. It's because we decided to go with the moniker of church, for what we do, which makes sense given our, our long and storied history and how we got here, kind of a thing. Like, church still makes sense. I mean, some places like Unity Temple in Oak Park uses the word temple, but most other places use like church and things like that. Oh yeah, all the time. Because people will be like, why are you going to church? You're an atheist. And I'm like, okay, well, so I go to a church and we all believe different things. And even we and you go into your elevator speech, right? We all have our little, like, 2 to 5 minute, or we've all got a 30-second one. And then when people ask follow-up questions, we go into our like 2 to 5 minute prepared explanation of what that actually means. So yeah, constantly, all the time. And even right now, like when I talk to people about it, because they know that I'm not a Christian, they know that I'm not, part of any other, and I do a lot of interfaith work, and like people who work in the interfaith arena, like they know who UUs are, they know who we are, but other people who are not like in that particular space, but are still doing organizing, because I do a lot of organizing, you still have to explain. They're like, wait, I thought you were like, you've been like, you're like pagan even, like, why are you at a church, and I'm like, well, it's a UU church, and it's like, you go into the whole thing, and then I got really sick of that, so I've kind of started trying to find, like, when you go, you're working, so when you go to like pitch things, sometimes you have to like describe what you want to do is like so and so meets something or other, like this but without that, kind of a thing. So I'm like, how do I describe UUs? We're like Quakers who smoke and drink. Like, we're like super cool and chill, but we think dancing is awesome, and So we're not quite, and now we're not all, we don't believe in God and things like that. We don't have to, but so I'm like, okay, so we're like, we're a disorganized religion. Because people will be like, I hate organized religion. I'm like, okay, well, we're like disorganized as a religion. How about that? So you have to find like other ways to sort of pitch it to people so they get it. Or sometimes I just go, just look it up. Just go to uua.org and just look it up. Other people have like, they've written about it. Just go look it up. Just go read about it. Just go Google it. Like sometimes it's just exhausting. I have not found the perfect elevator pitch yet, because we're always changing, and it's because it used to be like, okay, well, we don't all believe the same thing religiously, but we all believe in these 7 principles. And then I was like, okay, well, now there's an 8th principle, and now we're not doing principles anymore, so we're doing other things. And there's kind of, I don't know, maybe because we changed some of the wording in one document, so now we don't yet like it's all just like a big craze. So I just go, just come check us out. Just like, we're cool. We're not going to make you do anything. Like, we're just fun. Mostly I get people to come in from the like social justice aspect of things, because there's a lot of people out there right now who are wanting to be part of something bigger that is not tied to one specific political party or another, one specific movement or another, because they care about all the movements. That's why I get so many people are like, oh my God, like I really care about all these things, but I'm going to like 75 different meetings. And like, is there like one group that's doing that? I'm like, well, we do a lot of these things. We cover the gamut. You only have to show up once a week on Sundays, So I more so tailor the response to like the person or the situation, but no, there's no like, and then maybe that's the beautiful thing about UUism is there's not one answer, so we all have to spend like, thousands of words trying to describe who we are.
Yeah, it's so true. I would love to hear more about the social justice work that you do, but I want to make sure that I hear a little bit more about Goosh
Oh,
and the youth group, and how it was set up. When did you meet? What did you do with each other? Just maybe like a highlight moment, or yeah, something you will always remember about that group of people. Yeah.
sure. So Goosh was probably one of, if not the largest youth groups in the state. I joined about 1998 when I was about 15. And we would meet Sunday evenings. If memory serves, it was every Sunday. It might have been every other. It was a long time ago. But it was regular. It was regularly meetings, and it was in the evenings, which was interesting because most of the kids who came to Goosh did not attend the church. They did not attend service. They didn't do any of the RE stuff. They only ever showed up to that building for Goosh in the evenings, and then when we had events, and when we had conferences and things, or even the people who were like later on part of the leadership and part of like the executive board and stuff, for MYRUU or Michigan YRUU, even if they like their parents went to BUC, they didn't necessarily even go to anything but our YRUU stuff, right? Like sometimes it was, and then we're busy, so people got kind of distracted with other things in school and all that kind of stuff. But it was huge, and it was like the main feeder really for the, not all the adults, but like a lot of the real strong leaders. One of them was Tom Cranston, and he still goes to the church, and I see him every Sunday and I give him a big hug. And so he was a huge driving force in that as well. He was our leader. He was an amazing, and still is, just an amazing mentor to all the youth. So Tom would lead that. There were various other leaders at the time, whose names escape me, because again, sorry, this was almost 30 years ago at this point. And then there were from other, other bigger congregations in the area. So like Ann Arbor, Michigan has like a bigger, and Detroit has, and so there's, there were a lot of youth from different areas that would get together to plan the conferences, but the biggest contingency was always from BUC. And so that really was how I got more and more involved in the national YRUU, was starting with the MYRUU and planning those conferences. I learned how to do logistics. I learned how to plan things. I learned how to, make stuff run on time. I learned how to set up an agenda that had realistic timeframes in it, and how to register people, and how to get, make sure all the parents had actually signed things. And and so it's like, that was just such an education on in how to like do all these things that has served me very well for the whole rest of my life. And so Goosh was huge. It was huge. Any given Sunday evening, there were probably 20 to 30 young people that were there. And it still exists in a form. It's still there at BUC, but the membership is mostly of my kids and their friends. And there's maybe, 5 or 6 that will go. And now there's a couple others too, that have come and gone, but it's nowhere near as it was 30 years ago, because there's just, it's just doesn't exist. It was sort of, kind of dissipated, and it's a real bummer. It's a real bummer. I'm sad that my teenagers, I have an 18-year-old, 17, 16, and 13. I know. and I'm sad that, they did not get to have the same kind of YRUU experience that I did. And that's kind of sad for me. Especially, like I said, once I got a couple of years really involved in the YRUU stuff, I went to, I think probably just that next year, even probably in '99, I went to that con. I think that was Iowa, if I'm correct. I want to say it was. But anyway, after then going to that first con, I was like, oh yeah, we're going to do this more and more. This is going to be great, And then we started doing, as things changed, because we had changes in the sort of organization of how states were done, because it used to be Michigan was its own thing. It was MYRUU. And then Michigan merged with like Ohio Valley and parts of Indiana, and then it was like Heartland UU was like the new regional name or something. And honestly, I don't even know what it is now. I know it's gone through like several different iterations. So like once those things started changing and we weren't just Michigan anymore, we started doing sort of bigger organizing events, almost like little regional con kind of things. I mean, not the second or the first, because it's not continental, but you know what I mean? We were doing things like planning in Indiana, like big, huge things. And so that really was the sort of, stepping stone to doing things at the national level, was getting involved with MYRUU. And the only reason I did that was because of Goosh. So
yeah, it's amazing that strong local youth group was so strong, and maybe because we had a stronger presence sort of at the national level, and it trickled down, and you could go to national stuff, or you could just stay at Goosh, right? You could like there's like yeah, that's great to hear. I love that. So tell me about con. You we think it's in Iowa. I feel like I've seen the cover of the mug book within these journeys of things. And it could be Iowa, but
I'm sure I have it somewhere.
I know, I'm sure.
It's probably in my basement somewhere.
Yeah. Um, I guess what I'd love to know about ConCon is um, kind of like how this how and if there was a structure to it. Um, it was a week-long conference,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So, um, is there what kind of workshops did you go to? What was a worship that stood out to you? Or what was hanging out like? Like, just give me the
Yeah.
overall idea about what a con conference
So
was.
yeah, ConCon was a week-long national conference for youth. Um, and it was youth and some young adults. So the phrase youth was very loose. If I remember correctly, it was anywhere from like 15 to like 20-ish, maybe. So it was like a pretty broad range and a very interesting time in life where there's a big difference between 15 and 21. Um, but anyway, everyone was pretty chill. So I believe the first one that I went to in 1999 was in Iowa, and me and a few other of my MYRUU friends got on a bus in Detroit, and we took the Greyhound all the way to Iowa for like 16 hours on this bus ride together. It was a little intense. But we were super into it. And so it was kind of structured like a summer camp. You went and you were assigned where you were going to be sleeping. You were signed up for different workshops or classes or whatever it was that was being offered. And what they offered was, oh gosh, anything from just like messy art and body paint and, or like different sort of like physical challenge games, or like, it's a lot of team building kind of stuff where you're all finding some excuse to put your hands on each other. It was a very touchy feely time. And for those of us who were like into it, we were super into it. I can imagine if someone wasn't super into it, they would have been like, this is a nightmare. But this was summer camp for like extroverts. I mean, this is like everyone was immediately just like, you're cool, you're cool, you're cool. We're going to hang out and spend every possible second together. So it was really intense, but it was really fun. Real loose on the rules. It was the 90s, right? We all but we all wanted to be in community. It wasn't like anybody went. No, I didn't sit on a Greyhound for 16 hours to go to Iowa to be like, what can I get away with? It was more just everyone was kind of into the moment and being kind of relaxed and groovy. And then there was that was like during the day, and then there were like evening different programs and things like that. There were talent shows, there were um different um event, like one of the big things during the week was like a surprise event. Like the people who were planning it, we were going to go do something fun, or there was some big thing that we were all kind of like pièce de résistance, that we were um waiting for. And usually it involved like water or like a spa day, or like so, like there was just something like different, like that you were going to get to do. And then part of the workshops too, and part of stuff was if you wanted to be part of worship planning, because we did do a worship every night. And those were just very, very intense, deeper, you know bonding, stretching, doing a little bit of group therapy sometimes, that we all kind of just work our stuff out. But a lot of it was just more of that validation, right? We're all young people, we all struggle, we all have things going on, like we all get together and we validate each other's pain and struggle and worth and dignity and all that kind of good stuff. Um, and then, we were teenagers. It was the 90s. We listened to a lot of music that's still great, by the way. I have teenagers now who are like, yeah, I really like, Sublime, and I really like, you know, uh, Ani DeFranco. And I'm like, yeah, you do. They're awesome. So, you know, we just kind of hung out. Everybody brought a guitar. I swear to God, everyone had an acoustic guitar. There was a lot of singing going on. Everyone probably also brought a djembe. There were a lot of didgeridoos at the time too. Like, we were not totally understanding of how like we were culturally appropriating things in the 90s. So there were white dreads everywhere. I mean, not there were also like pink and purple and stuff, you know, like but we were all just really happy to be there and be with each other, and we knew we were in this sort of special time and place together. So there really wasn't ever like drama. There was no violence, of course. There was no like real clash of personalities or anything. Like, everything was really kind of peaceful. And but then again, we were all also teenagers and young adults, and there were lots of catching feelings happening. So I mean, like, there was, you know, some canoodling, but like it was mostly just kind of chill. And we all just kind of, like I said, when you got with a group of people who like get each other, you can kind of just go like, oh, yeah, okay, now I don't have to like reinforce my boundaries. I don't have, well, I mean, like, again, I sound like there were no boundaries. There were boundaries. People were respectful of them. It's just a lot of us had very few. So that's what that was like. And gosh, there were so many of them. I'm trying to remember all the places we went. And that was the great thing too, is they were kind of like GA, you know? And like, I did go to GA too, and do the youth stuff with GA and all that, but it was not the same vibe. GA was like, oh my God, there's a plenary schedule. We have the adults everywhere, and they're doing their thing, and no one listens to us anyway. And oh, we're stuck in this hotel. Like, one of the worst ones, but like, as a young person, when GA was in Nashville, I went to that one when I was 19. Okay. And what can you do when you're 19 in Nashville? Nothing. You know, like, they can't let you in anywhere. You're only 19. No one cares. You know, so we're all stuck in this hotel and trying to like make the which of course we did, because, you know, we make fun wherever we go. So but I just remember that, like, going, oh cool, I get to like thinking, I've never been to Nashville, or I'm from Michigan, you know, I've never been to Nashville. Oh, I hear it's super cool. And then going like out in the town, like trying to go in anywhere, because at least, I mean, you know, in my neck of the woods, it used to be sometimes, you know, you can still get into a club or a bar if you're 18, you know, plus you just can't drink, but you can still be there. But everyone was like, nope, 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 nope. You're not 21. You're not getting in. Just don't even try, you know? So, but it was always fun because there were different places around the country. So it was, you know, there was a con. It was like in West Virginia. And I remember that big long road trip driving there. The one out in Washington, in Yakima, Washington. I was actually on the planning board for that one. And I remember that one was a lot of flights and buses and trying to get those logistics of people arriving and getting there and all that stuff. But that was the fun part too, is you had an excuse every summer to go see a different part of the country and still be with a lot of the same people, you know, but there would always be new people too. And it was just a really cool time. And I'm sad that my kids didn't get to grow up with that same kind of experience. So I feel like I lucked out, and I was sort of like, you know, the last person on the ride who got to have fun. So
I love it. I was at Nashville GA too. So we were probably in the same space.
Probably.
We went to the Hard Rock Cafe. That's what I remember. Like, you can get in there, of course.
So like, yeah, restaurant kind of thing. Yeah. I just remember, I was 19 going, nope, I can't do anything. Great. Okay. Never mind. Shut it down.
Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. I wanted to jump in here to tell you that we are having a con-inspired connective retreat November 20th to the 22nd on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. This is co-directed by myself and Reverend Jason Lydon, with our weekend musician Matt Meyer. Many of the people you will hear on this podcast plan to be in attendance and even help lead some of the activities. Our registration is now open with a special early bird price. When you head to our website, YRUU.org, click on Connective Retreat. It's time to connect. See you there.
Tell me about any specific like social justice work that you did as a youth, maybe with Goosh or maybe at the larger national scene, and just that really stuck out to you as like something that sort of launched you into the love of doing social justice work.
Sure. So I remember one of the big issues when we were young was all of the organizing around the School of the Americas. I don't know if you remember that. I never really got into that much because I think when I was sort of new to the idea of organizing and doing, direct actions and things like that, like they were starting at a 10. They were like, we're going to go trespass. We're going to go break this lock. We're going to go do this and we're going to get arrested. And I was like, good luck. Like I was intimidated because they were already, like I said, they were at a 10. There was nowhere for me to like build up with them. So I remember a lot of that happening, but I did not get involved in it. But I did appreciate every time we went somewhere for ConCon, we would work with, or we would try to, and I don't remember if it was the same with GA or not, but one of the two. I remember we always tried to do something with some local organization that was doing like, boots on the ground work and do something to help support them, either like attend a rally or hold a rally or show up and do a service project or something like that. And so I liked that. That was a little bit more my speed as a 15, 16-year-old. And then I started getting a lot of, I don't say inspiration, but just like a lot of the organizing that was happening when I was later in high school was around pro-choice politics and things like that. And then we organized, this was after I was out of high school, but still in college and still doing like youth kind of stuff. In 2003, we organized a big contingent to go to DC to do the March for Women's Lives, if you remember that one. And so I remember applying a lot of those same skills that I had learned doing YRUU in organizing for going to that action and doing that kind of a thing. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. And, then I was in college and this was this was what, Bush 1.0, trying to then organize for the 2004 election, and doing a lot of that stuff and having already seen, when we were right in the middle of the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, like there was so much building up and there was a lot of like resistance to the war, which was justified. But I also saw there was a big gap in a lot of the pro-choice, organizing. And there was a lot of sort of, I don't say complacency, but it just kept getting pushed back on the burner, and then we were, I don't remember exactly but we knew that Bush, if he got reelected, he was going to get another Supreme Court, pick. And so a lot of that, my focus started going toward that kind of organizing. And then trying, in vain in 2004 to organize for Kerry. Because again, that was like my singular focus was like, and then we got John Roberts. So I was right. I hate being right. But that was it, like really learning how to organize events, like fed into my organizing, career that goes strong today, so it's essential learning for anybody who is thinking about or wants to do any kind of work where you bring people together to push for something. Anytime you can learn how to do that, you're going to be way ahead of the game when it comes to political or social justice, organizing.
My very good friend that I grew up with was Jason Leiden, who was one of the people that got arrested at the Schools of America. Yeah, and I totally get it. He is always at a 10.
Right. No, and as I say, I was like, more power to you guys, but like me coming into this, like, ooh, can I get involved? Was like, oh no, you guys are like, you're at like PhD level right now. I'm at like community college level of just getting introduced to this stuff, so yeah, but I do remember when he got arrested, and there were someone else, I can't remember what her name was, but like several people got arrested, got like 6 months, I think, in like jail, and like, and so to me, I was like, wow, like that's really hardcore. But I was like, oh no, this is not a like, let's start slow and build up kind of thing,
A smaller project that we had an opportunity to do in Nashville, actually, and maybe you were there. There was this man that would rake leaves and compost in a peace sign on the side of the road. And we all took a trip, some of us did,
Yeah.
to help him reorganize the peace sign of
Okay.
compost. Were you there? No?
I don't remember that. No.
Okay. Maybe you didn't get on the bus. All right.
I don't think I got on the bus. No.
Okay. That one always stood out to me. It was so simple. Yeah, it's just such a great thing. Yeah. You've learned a few skills here from YRUU, right, to help with organizing and everything. So tell me about your school. I see your diploma back there. You're a nurse, right? Tell me about how being a nurse, maybe anything from YRUU that you use today, in your nursing school or nursing, not school, but work. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it. So my nursing career is like a whole other long interview story. I worked in ICU and like neonatal ICUs for years. I worked in adult ICUs. I did nursing education, like training other nurses, things like that. What I do now is I have a small consulting company, and we are sort of subject matter experts. So when organizations need help getting through an accreditation process, or they've been found wanting by CMS for something and they're in trouble and they need to figure their way out of it, or they just want to know, are we in compliance with something, or they say we've got bad quality scores, we need to like improve things. So what we do is just do an assessment of the organization and then create step by step for them of like how to fix it. And that kind of breaking down a really complex issue, or like a really pie in the sky end result of like, we get out of trouble, or we get this accreditation status, or we get our quality scores, like that big, or we pull off a successful con. Like, how do you take that big desired end outcome and make it a reality? And the answer is, you break it down into parts, and you figure out what it is you actually really need to do. And you make a checklist, and you make a step-by-step instruction. And that's so much of what organizing and what I learned to do in YRUU was, okay, you're responsible for making sure like 100 young people get from the SeaTac, airport to this campsite 40 minutes away. How are you going to do it? So you take this sort of big complex task and you break it down into parts, and then you see it through. So when you learn that sort of a thing, and you can do it successfully at a young age, once you get bigger and the desired outcomes become bigger and more, I guess, life or deathy. I don't know, like the stakes get higher. You can feel more confident that, you know, what you've done or what you're doing is going to get you to where you are. Like, you know, there were some, I don't want to say they weren't like high stakes, because, you know, you are putting minors on a plane and flying them somewhere. So I mean, the stakes were relatively high, but like worst thing that happens is someone misses their connection and they go home. Like they're not going to die, you know? So, but it did make you want to do a good job. That wasn't just like something, because, you know, some people, some young people especially, may have some problem with follow through. They may have some problem with understanding what they're actually capable of, right? Like you think, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, overcommit yourself, overextend yourself, and then not be able to follow through, just because you promise too many things to too many people. There's no way that you can actually deliver on these things. But it also like made you realize again, like this is a big deal. Like again, it's not like someone's going to die, but no, you don't want to inconvenience someone. You don't want somebody to have a terrible experience. So there are stakes to this. This is not just something you can casually blow off. So I think having adults trust you at a young age to handle things that are fairly weighty, also instilled this sort of sense of responsibility in me from a young age as well, that like, okay, like don't mess it up. You know, like real people's real lives and real money, and you know, like this is not just stuff you can blow off and just, you know, half-ass, or you know, something like this has to be done right, you know. So and that very much translates into anybody who works in the medical field or the health profession at all. Like, you know, you have a lot of responsibility, and you got to make sure then that you have the ability to do what you said you're going to do. So that definitely was part of it, is feeling like the weight of it, and having, you know, I could go like a whole nother thing about youth empowerment. Like, I think that was one of the biggest, most successful aspects of YRUU was youth empowerment. It was the idea that, you know, from the youngest ages, I had adults who weren't my parents, but I had adults trust me, and adults talk to me like an equal, treat me like an equal, and actually defer to me and what on things, which does not happen in most of the rest of the world. You know, young people are not given a lot of respect or even a lot of leeway from adults in their lives. We tend to, you know, kind of baby kids and infantilize them for a really long time. And I feel like I benefited from having just the opposite of that, of having adults say to me, you know, all right, this is on you. You're going to plan this thing. We've got all these people coming. You're in charge of planning this workshop. You're in charge of planning this worship service. You're in charge of the logistics for this. You're in charge of making sure we all get up on time and the building gets cleaned up and you get out of here before church starts. You know, like nobody can just, you know, oversleep and oops, because all of a sudden, you know, you've got church members coming into people sleeping in sleeping bags on the floor, and nobody wants that. So I think having adults trust young people and giving them the opportunity to succeed. I mean, obviously with the appropriate amount of guidance that I see as an adult now, like, you know, but I've tried to use a lot of that similar kind of youth empowerment on my kids as well. I'm trying hard not to do everything for them or infantilize them, and just say like, hey, you do this, you can handle this. And again, I wish they had a little bit more from people who aren't me, but our church is great about, you know, they do trust our kids and they give them a lot of leeway. They do a lot of the child care at church, and they help with RE and stuff. So they get a tiny taste of that, but it's a different thing to be 17 and, you know, in the year 2000, and we got past Y2K. Whoo, okay, now the pressure's really on to not screw up the whole rest of everything, because we all thought for a second Y2K was going to be the end of it, you know.
is there anything that you've done with like social justice work? Did I see you ran for some sort of office? Did I?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
can you tell me about that? Yeah.
Sure. So, I in 2015, so even before 2016, I would take a little credit. Some people got like really motivated in 2016. I was a little ahead of the curve. But in 2015, I was working as a case manager for people who had been catastrophically injured in auto accidents. And in Michigan, we used to have this really, really great law that protected people who were injured in car accidents and like actually made their insurance pay up and pay them for like they were responsible for their care like in perpetuity for life, you know. Um, it was one of the best systems in the state or in the country for accident victims. Well, at the time, there was a bill that was proposed in the Michigan legislature to overturn it or weaken it or something. And so other than like protesting, which I've done since like birth, I swear, I had never thought of like doing anything other than of just showing up protesting when asked. So the woman, I was working for this woman who ran this case management firm that I worked for. She said, "Hey, this directly impacts us because part of the like lifetime benefits included case management services, so that people who were, you know, catastrophic. I'm talking catastrophic injuries like spinal cord injuries, loss of limbs, traumatic brain injuries, you know, so people who are quadriplegics or people who are like going to be institutionalized forever. I mean, this wasn't like you got in a car accident, you broke your arm, you know, like, and you would eventually heal and go back to your life. I mean, this is people whose lives were like completely altered by it. And one of the things that they paid for was case management services, so people could continue to, you know, live independently and not just be put in institutions, and make sure that the insurance company paid up when they needed a new wheelchair or they needed a ramp to their house, you know, like kept them, you know, keeping insurance companies honest, which is hard to do. And she said, if this passes, this could take away, you know, that guarantee of that benefit. So we need to like go and lobby. We need to go. And this is the first time I'd heard the term, you know, lobby or lobbying for something like outside of a movie. You know, I thought, you know, I'm thinking of like everything you've ever seen about anybody in DC, right? And I'm like, oh, we're not lobbyists. She's like, no, it just means going and talking to people. I'm like, oh, okay. So we went and I met with my state rep, and he was supportive of us. Then I met with my state senator, who was not. They're both Republicans, by the way. So it was an interesting thing. Like it was more so supported by Republicans, but it was not like total party line. And there were some Democrat. It's a whole political thing, but it was mostly supported by Democrats with some Republicans, and mostly opposed by Republicans with some Democrats. So it really was kind of a bipartisan issue. So the House rep, I had no problem with. He was like, "I'm with you. It's great. I'm going to vote it down." But the senator was like mansplaining to me how like that's not what this is about, and this is, we have to be blah blah, you know, just totally talking down to me. And like the more he talked, I started to realize like, oh, he has no clue what he's talking about. Like he's trying to tell me things that are not accurate or are just like completely fabricated or have like insane leaps of reasoning, you know, in them. And it finally hit me like, oh, this guy really just doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, oh, maybe he's not actually that smart. He doesn't, like, I always assumed people who were elected to office were like super smart. Mostly they were lawyers or they were just well connected. Like, you know, I just assumed like if you got to that point where you're making a life and death decisions for people at a huge scale for like 100,000 people, you know, kind of your neighbors, like maybe you know what you're talking about. And like that, it was 2015. I was very young and naive. This was 10 years ago, right? You know what I mean? We were all much more naive 10 years ago than we are today, right? So that sort of veil was like, that fell off there. And I had that little thought in my head of like, what if you were the person in that seat instead? Like, because I was just like instantly not intimidated by this guy. I'm like, okay, you're not that much smarter than me. You're not that much well, you're more well connected just because you're there. But there was no reason that like I didn't have like a better resume than this guy potentially to do this job. Because I was thinking about doing the job. So I went and I found a candidate training program that was it started in early 2016. Emerge. I don't know if they're in lots of different states, but it's called Emerge, and they recruit and train pro-choice Democratic women only to run for office. So they had just started in Michigan. They're no longer here. That's a whole other story. I got a lot of stories. But anyway, so I decided when you start going through this training, they really encourage you like go run for something. This is before run for something was a thing. They were like, go run for something. So there was an open county commission seat in my district that I decided to run for. And so I was on the ballot in 2016. And of course, it didn't go how I didn't get elected, nor did the person that we all wanted to get elected in 2016, right? And so after that, when that all kind of fell apart, then I went into like organizing hyperdrive, and I started an organization called Women Organize Michigan. And it was like this just sort of umbrella organization that was just trying to bring together a coalition of all the other groups in the state, all the like kind of like I said in the UUs, and everyone's like, there's so many causes, I don't know how to do it. I was like, okay, we need to have like one umbrella where everybody can come together, because we all know we have targets on our back. We all know like we all have to like brace for the worst here. So it became this like sort of just coalition of like all of the either women led or women focused and also LGBTQ plus inclusive organizations. And we all just started having these summits where I organized around the state and had people come together, table, everybody talk about what they're doing, elected officials, candidates, everybody. And then it came out later in 2017 that the state Senate district that guy was in, he was term limited. And so that was going to be up. And nobody wanted to run for it because it was, at the time, it was like the way it was gerrymandered, it was this like super red district that like no one had even tried to do anything with. And no one was going to run, and they were going to just like have somebody put their name on the ballot, sign a waiver, and like not even like run, because I'm not going to get into it, but like if you sign a fundraising waiver, it says that you are, as the candidate, you are pledging you are not going to raise or spend more than $1,000 on your campaign. Essentially, like you're literally just a name on the ballot. You're not actually going to run. So that's what they've been doing, is just like putting in these like placeholder, but nobody actually ran a campaign. And I was like, well, because they were like, well, it's a throwaway district. Like it's, no Dems gotten over like, 30% or something. And I was like, yeah, so I ran for state Senate. And I got like 48%. Like it was so close. I lost by like 4,000 votes out of a like, 200,000 vote kind of a thing. It was so heartbreaking. And then there was a whole other thing, that the scandal that happened with the House seat, and this woman got arrested and stuff. It was crazy. But and then 2020, they were like, okay, we need you to run for your House seat. That was also up. And you did so well last time, and it's a more favorable district, and 2020 is going to be such a great year for everyone to run, because we can all be out there and we can all be knocking on doors and everyone's going to be all together and it's going to be great. And then March of 2020 happened and we all went, oh my God. So yeah, running in 2020 became impossible. And I spent my state rep at the time was completely useless. He was like totally red pilled MAGA, was out there like telling everyone COVID was a hoax, and was like just refused to wear a mask. It was just like being horrible. So I'm like, the nurse in me too, I'm like, I went into literal triage mode. So like, we weren't knocking on doors because we weren't gonna knock on doors and talk to people and get in their faces and stuff, right? So we just did phones, and I spent my entire time like doing constituent services for him, basically. Like, because everything I'd be like, they were like, you're the only, you have talked to me, but Ryan hasn't. I have not heard a thing from him, and his office won't call me back. And I'm like, well, just gonna do what I can. And then yeah, he ended up winning again by like a few hundred votes. Mostly because Trump was on the ballot, and again, the seat was gerrymandered, and like, so yeah, no, I ran 3 times unsuccessfully, unfortunately, but part of that was just, again, me going, no one's gonna do it. All right, fine, I'll do it. But now we passed a independent commission redistricting thing in Michigan, so now all the seats are ungerrymandered. So now I am happily represented by Democrats, like top to bottom, because it had been, because I was so gerrymandered, like our state, both of our senators are Democrats, our governor is Democrat, like everything at the top federally, my congresswoman is Democrat, like, and then all of our township, all of our school board, like, and it was all the House stuff that was gerrymandered. It was like, so I'm well represented now. Everyone asks if I'll run again, and I was like, maybe if we get in a jam again. But I have good representation now. I don't feel like primarying anyone. Like, I never really wanted to get into it just to like be a politician. Like, I wanted to do the job, and I also like refused to let a seat go uncontested. So that's kind of that.
Thanks so much for all your amazing support for our documentary. Your help in so many ways is super valuable as we keep moving forward. To get these important stories out to everyone around the world, we are now looking for a little more financial help. Please head over to YRUU.org. That's all spelled out, YRUU.org/donate. And give whatever you can. We really appreciate your generosity.
I will just say, after YRUU, because it was like, for me, it was like, what comes next? After Marwood, it was like, YRUU. Then after I aged out of YRUU, or kind of like on the cusp there when I was in college, I did start a college UU group. So I went to Western Michigan University, go Broncos, in Kalamazoo. So, and in Kalamazoo, there's actually 3 colleges. There's Western Michigan, it's a small little town on the west side of Michigan. So there's Western Michigan University, there's Kalamazoo College, which is like a small liberal arts, like private school. And then there's Kalamazoo Community College. And so we ended up making, our group was hosted by Western, but was open to any UU youth or UU college students in the area. And I worked with People's Church of Kalamazoo and their DRE, who's a wonderful woman named Diane Melvin. She's still there. She's still awesome. And we founded COOLS, Kalamazoo UU Liberal Students, because we have to have an acronym. You cannot be a UU organization without an acronym. So ours is COOLS. And so that was started, I want to say, in either 2000, I want to say 2003, probably 2002, 2003. And we started doing an annual conference. And again, I took all the skills I had, how to do this. And we did a young adult conference over the long weekend of Martin Luther King weekend, because most students had that Monday off as well. So we started doing that and having a young adult conference there. And I'm happy to report, like 20 years later, it is still happening. It is still happening every January in Kalamazoo.
That's awesome. Yay. Yeah, this has been great. There's been so many things that you've said that give a new perspective to the voices that we've already heard. And then there's many things that are validating and similar. And so I just love that it's these similar stories, and then we take it, and then it's when we see what people have done with their lives that you really see it like start to blossom, and it's so cool. Yeah, and just all the work that you've done, and just in your life so far. I mean, I can't even imagine what's next for you.
Well, I mean, I work right now. I do a lot. Like I said, I have my consulting firm, but then I also do other consulting work. I do consultant for the Carter Center in Georgia. So Jimmy Carter's, foundation, and I'm working on doing for the last year in Michigan. And we're in 6 states. We're actually expanding into 2 more soon. But we have what we call a Democracy Resilience Network. And so in Michigan, our group is called Michiganders for Civic Resilience. And our goals are to mitigate political and identity based violence, and to restore trust in like civic institutions. And so we have former legislators. Actually, we're the only all women team. But so we have a former Republican legislator and a former Democratic legislator, and I'm the state coordinator. And so we put on events, more events, right? And training calls and rapid response and things like that, are really just trying to do education around elections, how they work, what is normal. Just because something doesn't look right doesn't mean it was fraud. Like, you just might not know that this is how it's actually done. So last year we did just a ton of education on how elections actually work. And, we were trying really hard to put things in place. So if there was an outcome different than what actually happened, we were trying, like, this was sprung up after January 6th, right? This effort from the Carter Center. And so we were trying to put things in place to try to mitigate as much as possible that sort of like election, related violence. And when it didn't go that way, now we've kind of morphed into trying to deal with and tamp down a lot of the political and identity-based violence that we see. A lot of hate groups are emboldened, a lot of, we see a lot of people out on the streets doing things, so like, we're working right now really hard to try to keep people together as civically and civilly as we can, and mitigate that violence. And we have a lot of work to do, and it's really hard sometimes because a lot of us are very scared and are very angry and are very vengeful, like we want someone to be blamed and punished, and for what we're going through, and a lot of that sort of breeds not just resentment, but can mount into violence. So part of what we try to do too is trying to get people to start to see each other as humans again, and not as partisans. Try to teach people to not that we agree, like, we don't agree at all, but how do we disagree better with each other, where we're going to still see each other as humans at the end of the day. So it's a very, even though President Carter was very devoutly, Christian, it's a very human thing that we're working on. So all of this just kind of carries on for me. And we're just doing our best right now to try to keep people from killing each other over politics. And some days are better than others, So that's kind of where I'm at. Plus, having 4 kids who are all, my oldest graduated from high school this year, and my son, who's a senior this year, we got to do his senior pictures because he's going to graduate next year. And, so it's a lot of stuff going on, but, doing this kind of work just kind of helps me feel like I have a little bit of something positive to put out there when everything is so negative. So, and I hope too, I know that there's going to be a lot more YRUU the vote stuff going on next year for the midterms. And there is going to be more organizing and more stuff going on. So I really do hope that we're able to show the rest of the country and the rest of the world that we exist and that we're good people and that we're trying really hard to accomplish really good things. And I'm hoping that that effort will also kind of align with a lot of those same sort of goals of getting people engaged, teaching people how to be, sort of in conflict, but in a good, productive, and healthy way. And I think that's also one of the downsides to not, and that, I would hope, like UUA, if you're listening to this, like we have to reinvest and build up youth programming at a national level. I'm just, I'm not angry, but I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed, right? I'm the classic mom, that my teenagers do not have the same experience that I did, and they're not going to reap those same benefits. And I know things were tough. I understand some of the reasons why. I mean, I'm not privy to all of the insider information, but I have some friends who talked to me at the time and told me, talked me off the ledge a couple times when they're saying we're disbanding, YRUU and stuff like that. Like, I get it. We had some rough stuff and we had some things that weren't pretty, but like, I still don't see why the best course of action was to just shut it down and walk away. Why is that? How has that ever been acceptable? That what, conversations are too hard for us to have? We're too afraid of saying the wrong thing. We're too afraid of, having some scratchy feelings towards each other every once in a while. And like, we can get over that. We all start from, a place of understanding, and we're a covenantal faith, like that broke covenant with me. You just decided unilaterally, it seemed like, that you were going to take this thing away from me, from my kids. I mean, I had it, but my kids didn't get to have it because it was too hard and it was too icky and it was too embarrassing, or it was too whatever. I don't know exactly, what it was that was the final, straw. But I can't imagine. I didn't see a lawsuit. I didn't see anybody going to jail. I didn't see, and maybe they did, but I'm not, like, I didn't see horrible headlines in the, New York Times or Boston Globe or whatever, like what was so horrible that we couldn't possibly work through it, that now the next generation of my, our kids didn't get to have any of this. And now the best we have is maybe a little bit of regional stuff, or you're back to like your own congregation. Like we do some stuff in Michigan again, but like it's not the same. So if you're listening, powers that be, at the UUA, bring it back, make it how you want it to be, put some better guidelines in. Yes, we don't need to, smoke. Our kids don't need to, be as free as we were in the 90s. I get that. But they can't be so hard that we can't do it, because that's just that says a pretty clear message that you don't think young people are worth it. And that's not the way you build up a movement, or definitely not the way that you sustain a relationship or congregants. Everyone complains all the time. I was on my board at the church. I'm very involved. Every single church ever, every UU church complains, why aren't there young people? Why aren't there young people? Where's all the young people? Why are we all 80 plus? Well, because you systematically divested anything in keeping your young people. How can you say, how do we have no young people? You told them they didn't matter. You told them they weren't worth the struggle. Are you kidding me? Like, you've got to be smarter than this. For a generation now, you have told young UUs, no one cares about you. So now you're wondering why they don't bring their kids back to church with them? Well, it's not that hard to figure out.
This podcast was produced by Linden Tree Productions. The interview was conducted by Lindsay Cattle LaPointe.
Music featured by Scott Murphy and Matt Meyer.
For more information, go to yruu.org. That's the question all spelled out. WHYAREYOU YOU.org.
Don't forget, our documentary, YRUU, is available to watch now by renting or buying it through Vimeo.
Please subscribe and review this podcast. It will really help more folks find this content.